Welcome back to the Lurk Here podcast. My name is Bethany, and I am joined today by my co-host Darrell and our lovely guest, Bec Godsey. Bec, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and it's an honor.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, the hardest question of the podcast is, in your own words, who are you and what mission are you on? Bec?
This is actually really hard because I change this all the time. But I think this is really important for people in the gaming space because, and I teach this to my students, like you're constantly evolving. Like no one has one set path. And so it'd be like, this is who I am. I'm like, well, not anymore.
In this episode.
In this episode that you catch me at. Right now, I'm a full-time teacher over at Full Sail University, and I am a course director at the game business and esports program specifically. But I also do a lot in the TTRPG space, and I've worked with collaborators such as T-Pain, Wounded Warrior Project, Norton Antivirus, Walmart, and a whole variety of other organizations, which is really fun.
Nice. Education. Love that. Spends a lot of time in education. It's not an easy space.
No.
And obviously it doesn't pay that well. So I'm curious, you've been working in higher education for quite some time. What drew you to teaching, and ultimately, like, how does that intersect into this work around gaming, content creation, esports, etc.?
Well, let's admit it. It's really fun to be in the industry, but when you're in there, you go, well, why don't we have this? Why aren't things this way? And while it's great to try to do it yourself, I have found one of the best way to impact a growing industry, especially one so young as the gaming space, is I just work at the collegiate level and I help shape minds and give influence and inspiration there. And then I send them out to go get wonderful jobs and become great influencers and impact so much more than what I could do as an individual. So selfishly, because I want the gaming space to succeed, I work with students to make sure they can make the things that I want to go to, the things I want to play.
No, that's really interesting. I've had a few conversations around this because I feel like, both industries, this unique intersection of esports and education, both industries have so much to learn from each other.
Yes.
I think that, the point that you made around the idea of, because education and educators have this long-term view, right? Because it's a long game to really help support the growth of young people, right? And the success of their future. You don't see that quote unquote ROI or metric turn around in like 1 year, 2 years, right? That's right. A 10, 15, 20 year projection. And I feel like esports, because it's so young, it tends to have more of a short-term view. I'm curious to hear maybe that intersection for you. Like, what are you seeing, the esports industry learn from education, and then vice versa? What are you seeing the education industry learn from, the endemic esports space?
Yes, you're right to call out that it does require a lot of patience. And there's also a lot of energy that students come into the classroom with that they've picked up from social media, right? Where they look at their studio and go, well, if they just did this, or if the league had just done things that, and it's taking a small pause to realize how much it takes to put on events like this, or to produce a game that they love, or the tournament that they go see every time on Twitch, right? That there's a lot more that goes into it, and you can't just complain on Twitter and think that you're going to be able to fix everything. And also then seeing, like, where do you start? You're not going to start off as your first job as a manager, right? So there's a lot of relearning and exploring at what this looks like. What do job opportunities look like? What is the competitiveness of said jobs? What are skills that are currently in place, but what are also skills that we need to start teaching for the future? And that's really the hard part, where education is trying to keep up with esports, is it's no longer just like, here are the basic skills, but what is the thing that is going to be the thing 5 years from now, right? We've been talking about the importance of VR for how long, right? And to be honest, that one hasn't launched in the same way that we had originally anticipated and had been teaching in classrooms. And so there's a balance of how much future oriented do we need to be versus practical oriented, and how much do we teach in the classroom, and balance of here's where things are now versus we need to develop you to be leaders in the space, but you're going to be with the leader mindset entering as entry level individuals. It's a weird clashing. And it will continue to create, hopefully, and purposefully, this discomfort of how things are now. And people don't like that, but you should. Like when you're learning in a classroom, it should make you uncomfortable with how things are now, because you're learning ways in which you go, oh, I have a means now to activate something, to make things better, to have an idea and work with people who have similar ideas to try to change it, to evolve it. And that ultimately also creates a lot of difficulties if people aren't as open to welcoming new and brilliant individuals into the space, to have that listening ear, to welcome new individuals, to say, you have something we haven't seen before. You're doing something different. You have an idea we haven't heard. And it's kind of unfortunate that esports kind of is adopting a little bit of a stodgy mindset in some places. But the places that are open to it will certainly evolve. And that's the same mindset that could be critiqued of education as well, right? How we can be so stodgy. And we've seen a little bit of a pullback already. It was just a few days ago, ISU dropped their esports team, right? Of, well, what do we need this team for? What is it important for? What are the stereotypes around it, right? What is this self-serving need? And it's like, you've barely had this team for a hot blink of a moment compared to like how you've had other sports teams. Why you're not giving it its same runtime to build, to grow, to create, to invest in the life that it can provide for students, and also how we change and teach things in classrooms too. It's no longer just papers, right? I'll be honest, since I've graduated myself, I'm like, I don't know the last time I've had to turn in a paper to anyone that's longer than 3 pages, right? So it's trying to continue to work on this balance of learning and application and forward thinking.
Are you seeing a lot of crossover in your student population? Meaning, are you seeing folks that were already in esports coming now back to be educated? Or are you seeing sort of the new generation trying to get a certification before they enter in, or a mix?
I actually get a nice little mix. We're lucky at our university. I do actually get quite a few non-traditional students who are like, we're switching over. We want to try something different. And they're in a place where they can do so. And then, yes, I have the fresh minds of like, this is my first time doing anything at the collegiate level. Let's try this out. And it's exciting actually to see those minds interact with each other in the classroom. But it is also really good to think about the individuals who are coming back, or even just that it shows individuals in the space, whether they're choosing a university or there's some means, is that there's recognition that you need to be a continued learner. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the university, right? That's where I'm at. But education happens anywhere. And that mindset of wherever you are, you need to be a continued learner if you want to be at the top. The people who think like, I've made it, I'm just going to keep doing what I've done because I think my expertise is enough, is really shrinking their world. It's those individuals who go, I want to learn something new. And to be honest, I'm early on in the degree program too. And there's going to be some students like they already know some of the elements that I'm teaching, but they're open-minded and say, well, this is my chance maybe to try it a very different way, and I can fail in a safe space. And those are the students that are, again, they're taking knowledge that they have, whether it's new or it's old, and they're trying to revamp it. They're looking at relearning. Education spaces like universities can be great catalysts for it. But as long as people are saying like, I need to try something new, whether it's going to conventions and sitting and listening in panels, whether it's setting up workshops, whether it's creating a Discord of individuals who are challenging and presenting ideas and practicing applications across their many platforms and coming back with the data sets, right? Like that classroom can look like so many things. And I don't think people realize you don't always have to pay tuition dollars to be educated.
Yep.
Wow. Yep. Yeah. I'm snapping over here. That's right. The condenser, you can't hear it.
Yeah.
Bec, I know you love D&D. Can you tell us a story, like something that just had a huge impact on you and your outcomes, like based on your version of success? Can you tell us a story about either a student or something from your EDU space that just left an impact on you?
Let me think about this, because I also have to be careful. Students tell me a lot of things. And to be honest, it is sometimes very emotional, difficult, but I want to be very respectful of what they've shared with me privately.
Sure.
And what I can then share publicly. I'll share one that really kind of broke my heart. And it's not entirely the fault of a school system, right? But it's a challenge when teachers are typically overburdened, have too many students. But I had a student come in, and after she finished my class, she'd reached out to me and said, I just want you to know that I've never had a teacher invest in me the way that you do. And it's changed how I want to interact with other people. It's changed not necessarily what I want to do, but the way I want to do it. And I think that's really meaningful to me because I don't want students to think like they need to take the same pathway that I do, or if anything, I don't want them to think that I'm always right, because I'm not, unfortunately. But one of the greatest lessons that I think I can teach as a teacher is not what is the right answer, but what is the right way we go about in finding the right answer for ourselves. And for her to, one, have somebody who she felt really connected with and invested in her, because I do invest in my students. Some of my students may not think so, but I do. I care about you a lot. And to, one, have that recognized was nice, but for her to see that, internalize it, and then take it externally is a quick turnaround. That is sometimes a lesson that takes us so many years to learn as individuals, even when we have great mentors in our life. And I was so impressed and moved in my own way to think I fuel off of this, right? Not off of food and water like a normal human being, but off of knowing that what I'm doing matters to them, for them.
You said something there that kind of made me think of this sort of philosophical pedagogy around teaching. There's a statement that I like to say, kind of challenge teachers, is that you're no longer a teacher anymore, because teachers don't teach. There's nothing to teach, but rather you're a facilitator of thinking. And for me, that embodies exactly what you described there. Is rather than, giving them the information per se, it's really empowering them and building their capacity to, find the answers and know how to ask the right questions. I feel like that's a really key piece I want to highlight, because part of what I've seen, gaming and esports education programs, the reason why, they're so impactful is because it pushes the educator to step outside their comfort zone and kind of, in some ways, abandon traditional pedagogy and push towards a more progressive way of engaging their students. I think, kind of mirroring what Bethany asked, maybe not just the relationships that you have. What are moments that you've seen where you've seen a student really transform in terms of the way that they're thinking, right? Not just learning the rote learning, not just the basics, but where they're actually critically thinking and going beyond kind of what you're proposing.
So I'm going to go back to my very old teaching days here. Way back, I was actually an assistant director for a speech and debate team.
Nice.
I can hear it.
Nice.
Yes. And so critical thinking is kind of important in a program like that. But I would argue in any team, it's important. Like we could argue, of course, in esports, right? Like it's important to be able to critically assess the needs, understand your teammates, evaluate things, situationally, and be able to react live within that. And it's a big deal when you have young freshmen coming in, and in some systems, they're very used to just listening and obeying, right? There's not what do I think though is best in this situation? How do I evaluate this and make these decisions on my own? And I had a particularly excellent student in terms of getting a 4.0. Like they were great at listening to the rubric and they could get an A on every single project and 100%. But if you would ask them why they thought something was good personally, right? Like, or why they cared about something, right? It was just parroting back things that they had heard from teachers or parents, and that wasn't them. And so in my investing ways, right? In our coaching that we would do typically 2-3 times a night, having opportunities as they figure themselves out and change this framework of who are you as an artist, right? No longer just producing out content, like vomiting out answers, right? Think about yourself as you are an artistic piece, what you are creating. Why do you want to create yourself certain ways? Why do you want to provide certain answers that depict you in a particular light? How does this reflect on you? And that impacts their art, the stories they tell, the way they frame, the language they use. And it was really fascinating to go see this. And it reflects in their actual performance. Like it's, when you're in a live debate, it's one thing to just share out information. It's another thing to be able to recognize and react to it. So it's all going parallel to where they were as seniors, right? As fully fleshed out human beings who are kind, not only to others, but to themselves, and that they're comfortable. And this seems really weird, but I was celebrating with them when they got their first B. And I know that sounds strange, but that B gave them permission to try something new that they felt was right versus what they knew other people thought was right. And that is a very brave moment. Or like in the debate itself, like it came into fruition that they ended up losing a debate, but they made arguments that they were proud of. And that's the right thing to do. Like at the end of the day, it's not like, do I win by other people's standards? Do I get the A by other people's standards? Or do I win? Do I be myself? And that's, I'm winning to myself. What's the more important evaluator there?
Oof, solid. I like that a lot.
But that's a hard lesson to learn when we're constantly saying like, do you have a 4.0? Did you win the tournament? Like it's harder to measure how are you winning by yourself? Like even like at esports, like when we look at the stats that we measure, it's not how holistic is the team? Do they support each other, right? And we don't often value, first of all, things like what has been their growth. We look at just how many wins do they have, right? And so when we start to look at KPIs that are not our first face value, then we can better understand what it takes to be and redefine what it means to be good in a space, especially for ourselves. I hope I'm not mumbling, or if this is stupid, please tell me.
No. I was just sitting with that.
I was just like, well, I'm going to clip that. So let it breathe.
These
You're
are
totally fine.
But I think
we
coaching
only
wise,
hit like
it's
3
hard.
questions and already deep.
I'm always intrigued by coaching, right? Because coaching and the responsibility of it, and of course, the two of you know a lot about coaching, right? And the challenges of like the pressures of how do you take care of your team? And at the same time, how do you also make sure you meet the standards of external stakeholders who are expecting you to win, to represent us, to X, Y, and Z, right? Like there is this dual balance that sometimes coaches get stuck as being middle managers of sorts, like having to protect their team and invest in them and feel supported and letting them shine, but also trying to take the brunt if, you know, as normal teams do, have highs and lows, or that they take time to grow, or all of those fun details. It makes it difficult.
I was curious because a lot of what you're teaching sounds, I mean, it is idealistic in a way. You're teaching best practices in a lot of these spaces, but you just mentioned standards. And I know from my own coaching experience, I was creating them as I was going for the most part. Well, you know, data driven and working with UCI was a big piece of that. There was research being done at the same time, which helped. But I think in a lot of ways, you know, esports, we're winging it as much as we can with best practices from other regions or other industries. How do you teach like that? Are you teaching sort of the ideal based off of data that's already been done in esports, or things from traditional sports that we think should be done? How do you come up with standards for folks to align with?
It's a little mix and match. And to be honest, this is always the influence of any teacher of what data we think is important. I like both because I think that esports continues to become better when we look at lessons that we learn from other areas. Why make the same mistakes? And yet here we are sometimes. But that's because we like to learn for ourselves. And that's not a bad thing either. And just because it's failed for others doesn't mean it's failing for us. But it is important to diversify those needs. I tell students, like, even if you are competitive in one type of game, still go learn and observe the processes and skill sets of those who compete in other games or in other events, because the crossover that you can have will advance you.
Yeah.
For our debate
Yeah.
students, it was the same thing. Like debate is kind of holistic. Like you had to do performance side, you had to do limited prep, you had to do public speech, and you had to do debate. And we set that standard for our students because we said to be the best communicator for yourself outside of this space, you need to be adaptable and know all of them. This will serve you better. The more holistic your approach is, the better it's going to take you wherever you want to go. And for coaching, right, that's also a challenge of like, how do we continue to push ourselves? Where do we learn? It's not just saying like, well, this is what other teams in this league are doing. It's, well, what are people in other leagues doing? What is the NBA doing? What is the MLB doing? Right. And as you advance and you pull in all that and you learn from one another, and I really hope organizations and sports teams are also looking at esports and going, what are they doing that's working that we can steal? Because I feel like that's a standard that like, look, we've made it, that we're setting and leaving lessons for others out there, which they should already, but they haven't learned that yet in every area. But that's going to be important.
And Jarrell and I think globally often, especially around esports, because obviously every region sort of have taken it to a different level everywhere. And you mentioned before the podcast that you thought gaming and esports are sort of in this awkward teen years.
Yeah.
And as a metaphor. So what does that mean? And I'm guessing it's US based, that approach is a little bit like behind in your perspective. But yeah, when we look at Southeast Asia, obviously they're leaps and bounds ahead in standards and even, their governments obviously supporting them in different ways. It looks vastly different. So what does it take for us to get out of the teen years? Is it growing pains, something we have to wait on? And yeah, what do you mean by that?
So yeah, we are in our kind of growing pains era, but that's a good thing. Like I sometimes it feels like, oh, well, that's the awkward stage that we really want to get out of. But this is also the stage I think people forget, like the joy of being young is that that's your chance to try things. You should be exploratory. You should be bold in your efforts at this point. Like, dye your hair. It's going to grow out. Who cares? Says the woman who still has teal hair, right? But like, do what you want. This is your chance as you're testing things out, and be aggressive in it. You've got the energy. You've got the momentum. Quit saying no to things. And it will also recognize taking time, right? Like we remember how long it took for us to feel comfortable in our own bodies. Some of us are still learning how to feel comfortable in our own bodies. And that is a constant journey, but it starts now. And having that awareness and giving ourselves space to actually try it out is important. So there needs to be a lot of patience. Now, patience with it means that it's not just with ourselves. Like if we are the awkward teen in this situation, right? There needs to be a lot of self-love. We are very good at tearing ourselves down. We are good at tearing down other parts of our space. Like, well, look at them. Like, and I'm kind of sometimes that way too. And I go like, oh, have you seen how toxic that community is? Right? Like that's not always very helpful in that take versus how do we learn to make it better? How do we love on these situations to help them out? And it also means that, yeah, we need to have communities and spaces that care for us. Like we need to have universities that make space for us to be that middle schooler, that teenager who's trying to figure things out. Yes, we need a society and a government that says this is really cool, this is interesting. And I think we're getting closer to that. And in some spaces, it's overwhelming, wonderful support. Yeah. But it's continuing that process. It's hard when you have like, you go to school and you're like, I have a teacher that's super supportive. And then you go home and you have parents and they go, what is this?
Right.
Right. Like you can't have that split for a healthy growth. You've got to have it everywhere. And so we need to continue to push for that, especially as we are investing in the future of esports. If we want individuals who see this as healthy, as an investment for their career, of their livelihood, to invest not just the work that they do, but the skill set they have, the creativity that they have, their emotions that they have, their intellect, it has to be valued for them.
I like the connection to awkward teen years. I feel like there's a lot of drama in this space that's very much like middle school all over again. Yeah.
Yes, it's silly. Like in odd areas, it's competitive, and it's like, why are you doing that? Listen, you're all just super weird. Stop that.
We're all weird. Can we just collab now?
Yeah, can we just be like, we're together on this, please? Stop it. But we get in our moments or we feel strangely competitive to one another. or there's an assumptive limited access of resources, or sometimes there is a real limit of resources, right? And it's a challenge of, well, how do we handle this? Like, sure, when we get to the lunchroom, the tables are only so long and there are only so many seats there. And in a middle school brain, we go, only so many people can sit here. But as our brains grow, we go, oh, maybe we can pull tables together, right? Like, it's thinking differently of how do we solve this? But it takes time to grow that. And it takes the right people who are open to that, because there are some people who will keep those doors closed and be like, no, this table is just for us. And they like that exclusivity.
I want to keep on this this thought wave here, you know, because this connection to even just because we're educators here, and you know, I think we've all worked with middle schoolers to some degree or another. If we think about the industry and the space right now as like a middle school campus, how do we bring them together? How do we bring this space together? Like, you're already kind of alluding to it with the lunch table metaphor, but I mean, what are some key strategies we can take as educators to help the space unify, like Bethany was saying, and really collaborate in a way that strengthens the community versus, you know, constantly fragmenting and, you know, trying to take a piece of the pie?
I'm going to start with the simple, what I think is the simplest. Granted, getting some of these things is not so simple, but it is important to, one, have space for it. Like, create actual physical space, dedicated space. Don't just be like, well, there's a corner in the library with some of the old computers that you can have. That's not telling us that you're investing it. That's not telling us that you think it's important. Build something out. And it doesn't have to be fresh. And I know sometimes finding funding for it can be difficult, but it is a step process, right? It also means that you make awareness and accessibility for it as well, right? When are you hosting it? Who are you letting know and inviting to it? How do you entice them to come, right? And make it worth their while the first few times to get them hooked, right? There's certain standards like that. But I think the biggest thing that will matter is getting that community involvement from the beginning. It takes adults to show how excited that we love video games, how we love esports. You know, sometimes when I think of the most amazing teams, whether it's, I don't care. Like, there was a coach at one of my old universities who was in tennis, and he loved tennis. And granted, because of his love, he put so much of his time and effort into it. And he would talk nonstop about it. Like, sitting in his math class was more just like sitting in and sometimes learning about tennis. It was wonderful. He was overflowing with his love for it. And of course, in this, like, his dedication and his efforts, he was the coach of it. They had one of the most winningest teams for where they were. It was fantastic. And I think that comes to at the esports level too. Like, you can't just say, here's some, you know, switches, kid, have fun. They want to see this behavior modeled. You need to bring in adults, parents. You should start picking up controllers or keyboards, or right, start playing along. You don't have to be good, but showing that you care about it, that you think it is worth playing as well, or at least coming and watching all the games, or, you know, participating and bringing snacks or being moderators for their events. Like, that matters. That showcases this is what this can look like in a healthy and an invested way. I think people forget that. They think like it's for the children, so it's only children can do. But adults showcasing and living this out, how they enjoy and are partaking in this, is important too.
When we're talking about lurkers here, folks that aren't necessarily the CEO of a company making a big move to make this happen. You're talking about people like you and I that can either host an event or support something. Doesn't have to be, you have to have a degree to do all of these things either. We're talking about really low hanging fruit as far as something to start with. Is there something that you think orgs and folks that are already in the industry can start to do to sort of collab or pull together more?
I think people forget the importance of partnerships, right? Middle schools, high schools are a lot more open to receiving support and help. Like, I look at my college students, I'm like, you know, as a student, like, you can wield the student status to get internships and say, like, I want to go help out at a middle school gaming club, right? To show up and sometimes it's as simple as like, you can play the games. Like, you don't even have to be good at said games, right? You are there to help keep an eye on, like, what is our language? How do we trash talk appropriately? Because I love trash talking, but it has to be done well, right? Here's how we do it. it. Like, here's how we learn to share and give space for others to be controllers. Or you sit at the table and you help and you do drawings with the students that love to make fan art of the games, because we love fully built out communities of the fan bases that we have, right? Like, so there's so many more levels of, like, you don't have to be good at that game. Like, maybe you really love playing Call of Duty, but at middle school we don't play Call of Duty, right? But you can still sit there and engage with them as they play Rocket League. Like, still be a part of the space and be invested. Answer questions that they might have. Talk to them about what makes good teamwork, what makes them a good player. Talk to them about tournaments and content creators that they watch, right? Involve yourself. It's small but important.
You know, what I'm hearing too, a lot of what you're saying, you know, bringing in that educational perspective is this idea, you know, we talked about the long game, but esports and gaming is intergenerational. And that opportunity of, like you said, bringing in, you know, adults, young people, all in the same space. When I see the industry, you know, when it's slowly evolved, right? It kind of was just the sweaty gamers in the beginning that were really passionate, right? And now we're starting to see a much broader community start to be involved. You know, it's gotten to a certain point, but I think it still has a long way to go. I'm curious to hear kind of your perspective on how we can continue to, you know, grow these community spaces, to be more inclusive, you know, to bring in the lurkers that are not in the fold. How do we create more sustainable, safe and inclusive spaces for the community?
Yes. Accessibility and inclusivity is an incredibly important thing to put at the forefront when we're thinking about hosting events, when we're designing details. And I think people forget that it comes to a bunch of small actions, right? You're not putting on your tournament invite like, women, you're also invited, right? Like, that's not helpful language. Like, I saw that actually at a job application once. Like, there was an extra line that says, also, women and minorities are also encouraged to apply. Like, all right. Like, sorry, an afterthought. I get what they were trying to say. Like, don't just think this job is for white men. I was like, I hadn't thought that before until now. So it was interesting. But it leads to, like, design choices, right? Like, how do we make things look?
Yes.
I'll personally, like, I don't like it when they're like, we want to reach women, so we're gonna make it pink. As somebody who does not like pink, like,
hard agree.
Yeah, like, it's weird. It's a weird genderizing of color, and it also makes this assumption too that, like, men don't like pink, which I'm like, there's a lot of men that rock pink really well. Like, it's like, you're like, we're gonna give away a pink keyboard. Like, so many people, it doesn't matter who you are, would love a pink keyboard. Right? Pink keyboards are for the he, she's, and theys. Like, it's everyone that can appreciate it. So it's thinking about what are our assumptions on things like colors and how we market ourselves, and also where we market ourselves, and what is the accessibility of said places. And we're not just talking like wheelchairs and elevators, though that is equally important, but it's also thinking like, hey, if we want people to come, right, we want to make sure that they're in locations that are safe, and that the tournament doesn't end at 3 a.m. where there's no Ubers and femme presenting individuals feel unsafe standing outside the venue trying to find a ride home, right? It's thinking in other ways of, right, when we say that there are safe spaces, do we have a clear designated person that individuals can go to when they see something happening in a tournament? Because you can't bother to the tournament director. They've got a million other things going on. But is there a designated person besides just security, where it might feel hyper elevated in that moment, that they can go talk to and let them know, hey, there are situations that are concerning, right? Or somebody's starting to bother me, but it's not to the point where they need to be like kicked out sort of situation. Right? Like, there's a variety of ways that we can talk about this. Even in terms of accessibility, I love that more are thinking of, like, do we, when we host tournaments, do we also have one for entry level? Like, if this is your first tournament participating, you can participate in a separate bracket, because when you're at a live tournament, it is a whole different experience versus competing online. To have the energy of people there watching over your shoulder, to have your opponent right across from you where you can't turn down their mic and you can hear them screaming at you, right? Like it's a different experience. So I've seen some that have offered that, like if this is your first time competing, right, for especially in amateur brackets primarily, right? But if it's your first time competing in a live situation, right, there's a separate one for there, right? And understanding there might be a different experience that you have, a different understanding of how we interact and talk. But it also lets people know like we should welcome you. It also asks us things like, do we offer scholarships for people? Competing can be expensive if you have to fly in and to have hotels and to have food and to pay your tournament fees. That can be tough. In the speech and debate, when in the league that we were in, if you were a brand new team, a university team within your first year, we cut your entry fees by half to encourage, because we knew you don't have money when you start out, right? We want you to survive. We want you to encourage you to come and participate and be here. So we find ways to financially help you out in that. We make these kind of guidelines to say, how do we help you in any way that we can? How do we make this more available for you? Because in esports too, things are expensive. Those same costs add up for teams, right?
Definitely.
Paying for flights is hard. People eat a lot. If you've ever had to pay for a dinner ticket for 6 people, you will get sticker shock. I remember the first time I did that for my team, and I go and I'm like, what did they eat? And they nothing amazing, right? Like we were at McDonald's, but like paying for 12 college students, I was like, oh my gosh, this price tag. It adds up. It adds up. And so it's thinking at every step of the way, like pause down and just don't be like, we're having a tournament, but think about like every step, what might be barricades that stop people or discourage people from thinking this is for me.
I mean, you've bridged not only education, but you're on the creative side of all of this too.
Yes.
I can't help but call out that you mentioned T-Pain at the beginning of this podcast, just casually. So you're doing a lot outside of just teaching, I assume partly for your own joy in all of this as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of the creative endeavors that you have outside of teaching?
Yes.
Maybe what you have going on or upcoming too.
So my first initial touch point with T-Pain was I got a message via LinkedIn and said, hey, T-Pain is doing DreamHack in Atlanta. Would you like to be the dungeon master for it? And I go, yes, I would.
What an email. Yeah, what a message.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And then we had only 2 months to plan it. So I was really hyper excited. Then I went, oh no. But it was very fun. It was such a blast. And he is an incredible talent in many venues, but just has a charisma on stage. And so it was a blast. And we got connected with his team. And his team is also a bunch of creatives. If you follow T-Pain does a lot. Let's say like
everything.
Everything.
T-Pain's
like
got his hands in
this man is collecting side quests like they are worth their weight in gold. And I love that. And his team has to keep up with him, and they are amazingly talented individuals. And so they come up with crazy ideas as well. So recently when they were back up in Atlanta, they did Drift Symphony 2, and they're like, we want to bring this to Twitch. And so that's when they contacted Mudcat and I's company, Bad Guys Productions, and they're like, let's see how we can bring this on. And we're like, we have so many ideas, let's do this. And it was amazing. And that continues to make us think, like, how do we expand this space, right?
Yeah.
T-Pain has a really great Twitch audience, and they're used to watching him play video games and open Temu projects, right? But they had not all been able to attend his Drift Symphony areas that he's been going to. And this was a way that we continue to use these gaming spaces that were originally meant for video games. And we say, what else can we do? Let's think even bigger here. What are collaborations? He did a karaoke at the end, which was also very fun.
So cool.
Nice.
It's the combo of events that allows people to celebrate the complexity of who we are as individuals. Like, we don't just love video games. Like, as individuals, we also probably love like movies or TV shows or drifting or right, basketball or whatever it is. And to see opportunities where the things we love are represented more collaboratively allows us to celebrate who we are as complex individuals. And so I love doing work with T-Pain and his team, because they're always like, let's do something more, which is the best way of thinking about things.
I'm just jealous now. I'm just sitting here.
That's pretty cool.
Well, Bec, tell us where we can find you. Where can folks figure out what you're doing next and what you've got upcoming?
Yes. What am I doing next? So there's, of course, you can always find me at let me start this over. Good grief. Oh, I forgot. I do other things. Did you? I'm sorry. I don't just do the production. Sorry. Can I add in one other thing?
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Yes,
Yeah, do it.
How we're editing all of this.
Yeah. So in addition to teaching and also producing, I'm also a host. I do a variety of things. I've done it for the gamers for 3 years, which we did the gamers podcast Pink Pixels, which was really fun. I also have done a variety of things like with OS Studios, where you may have seen me in a DoorDash commercial. I'm sorry if you got really annoyed by the girl with teal hair in that, but I love doing it and it was a great time. Even with the US Navy, we did a lot of amazing stuff for them out in RimPack, but I love being a facilitator of questions. This has been kind of a weird situation where I'm answering. I love learning. I love seeing people's perspectives. So I prefer asking the questions instead. But I enjoy it. And so you'll find me eventually in a couple things that I've got coming up this summer on hosting gigs and up on stages for different conventions, which will be a very fun and exciting opportunity. But on top of that, if people are looking to find me, they can find me in a variety of places because my branding is inconsistent. It's either Bec Godsey, Bec Godsey, or causticpheonix. If you find one of them, you'll be able to find all the others. It's a great hunt. So if you love games, there's a very easy one if you need a good one to start off your day.
A quest to find Bec.
Yes.
We'll link it all for everybody. We'll make it easy. Bec's something you should be following.
Before we wrap, we always like to ask all of our guests kind of a future question to see where the prospects are, as well as just where their vision is at. So when you think about your work, when you think about the gaming, esports, and education space, where do you see it going in the next 5 or maybe even 10? And what do you hope to see, change or, come to fruition in those next 5 to 10?
Yes. I am hoping that we see a bigger investment in both the online and in-person communities. It's not necessarily just like the tournaments themselves or the game output that we have. I think by making sure that we do more of appreciating the expansive value that people committed, people who love this space, right, as fans bring to the table, that's where we're going to find our longevity. It's not just saying we just need to produce more games. If we just host more tournaments, right? It's not it. It's saying, how do we make them feel connected, that they want to stay, that they have a role to play? What is it in basketball? This is going to show a limitation here, where the audience, the fan base is considered what? The seventh man? Isn't that the take?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That they are another player on the court here. And fans, they need to be that other player on the esports team that they're cheering on. They need to know that they are important, that they are seen, that they matter, because they do. They really do. And once we really activate communities more, that's when things are going to just become so much easier, I think, for us. I'd love to say, right?
Love that. We're all about community over here. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you're part of our community, Bec. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you. I love this. I've been so excited about all this Lurk stuff. I've been following. And then when I got the text message, I was like, yes, this is so cool. So thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Yeah.